believe you have all heard Dr. Moore speak today. I am an attorney, as Kelly said. For the past 2 years, I have been a public information officer at the Auditor of State's office. Prior to that, I worked about 10 years as a newspaper reporter, primarily at the State House. And then prior to that, I practiced full-time as an attorney. Currently, I am Director of Communications and Governmental Affairs for Charter School Specialists. We are the contract representative for one of the major sponsors of charter schools in the state, St. Aloysius Orphanage in Cincinnati. We have about 50 schools that we sponsor across the state, from Cleveland to Cincinnati and in all directions. We also, in addition to Dr. Moore and myself, Chad Aldis is the Vice President for Policy and Advocacy for the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. Chad has a long history in choice in Ohio, and you will enjoy hearing from him today. And Representative Andy Brenner, who is in the thick of it. And you will hear people say different things at different times about Ohio. Is Ohio a leader in education? Is Ohio a leader in school choice? Or is Ohio not quite there yet? It is a very exciting time legislatively in Ohio. Since Governor Kasich took office, there have been many bills that have significant import, that are making many positive changes. It doesn't mean they're all good, and just because you make a change doesn't mean you're going to be able to keep that change. I did not necessarily agree with Governor Strickland and his major program, which he called the evidence-based model of education, but he did accomplish some good things that are still current law. And some of that grew out of No Child Left Behind, which has been around for quite a while. But things like flex credit, which I don't think is being used by a substantial number of students in Ohio, but everybody has a policy on it, so that tool is there to be used. Post-secondary enrollment option. As a reporter, I covered a lot of students who were taking advantage of that, saving a lot of money for college by taking their courses ahead of time when they did not have to pay for it. So there are good things happening no matter your political views. But as Governor Strickland's experience shows with his effort, just because you get it once does not mean you get to keep it. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Representative Brenner has to tell us about that battle from his chair, watching that. The one thing I wanted to say in my remarks today was that as board members, whether you are board members or whether you are close to board members or concerned about the system, I think you're going to face a choice of 2 doors. And you're going to, you must walk through one of those doors, but you cannot walk through both of those doors. And when I tell you what the choice is, you will think that that's silly, that it's obvious, that of course you will walk through the one door. But I have to tell you, I did a lot of work. I served on boards, I've served on charter school boards, I've done legal work for boards. As a reporter, I've probably written 1,500 news stories, and probably 500 of those were about school boards. And it's my opinion that there is not a single board in the state that has ever successfully walked through the door that you're going to think is obvious. And there are reasons for that. There are plenty of people in this room who can tell you how difficult that is. And the good news is, if there is hope for boards in choosing the right path, it's in this room. The whole theme of this conference is the right theme. And the first door is a door that serves the students. And everybody believes they serve the students. So if you want to say, I succeeded as a board member, I succeeded by serving the students. The other door is a door that serves your own interest. And what I mean by that is, if you try to serve the students, you will in fact be vilified for it, because it is very difficult and slow to serve students, especially students that are in trouble. I heard Yvette McGee-Brown give a speech at a conference 2 days ago. She's a former juvenile court judge and justice of the Supreme Court, and a supporter of charter schools. And she told a story about a student named Lamar Coleman. And as a juvenile court judge, she had to decide whether he was going to be tried as an adult, he had murdered someone, a heinous murder, or whether he would be tried in the juvenile system. She said he should be tried as an adult. He was convicted, sentenced to 30 years to life. Lamar Coleman has a brother, Coley Coleman. Coley Coleman received a master's degree in mathematics and is successfully employed. I don't quite remember the company, but he's all grown up, doing very well, and everything that goes with that. The difference she felt between the two students, and as a judge, she had reviewed Lamar Coleman's records, and she said he missed about 60 days of school in the first grade, and about 80 days of school in the second grade, and more than 100 days of school in the third grade. By fourth grade, he was, by and large, lost to the system. And her point was, Coley had teachers and supporters who enabled him to perform. Lamar didn't, and it turned out horribly for him, but he's not the only one. There was a newspaper story, there was a major event about a week ago. Columbus Public Schools had a school levy. That levy failed. You are familiar with all the things that are going on with Columbus Public Schools, the attendance investigation and everything else. And in that story, at the bottom, the part nobody ever reads, there was a statement about how they were going to come back from the levy. And they did what reporters call burying the lead. One of the leaders of the Columbus effort made the statement, "Tomorrow morning, more than half of our kids are going to wake up and attend a failing school." Now, I work in charters. If I went out and I said, I've got 100 students that are attending a failing public school, I can guarantee you, I can name 7 reporters that would tomorrow write a story about that. That would be news. There are 50,000 students in the Columbus Public School District. If 25,000 of them are attending a failing school, that is a major loss. And that is the big number story of the Lamar and Coley Coleman story. If you say you want to walk through the door as board members to serve those students, what's in front of you is sitting down with a Lamar Coleman when he's in the second or third grade. And what that looks like is for every 100 times you try to do something, you're going to fail. And if you're lucky, you'll succeed 2 times and put Lamar on the track that Coley was on. Now, if you try to say that to a reporter, you say, what did you do? Well, 100 times I went out there. Oh, how did it work out? Oh, I failed 100 times. They're going to label you a failure. You'll be doing your job, but it doesn't sound successful. There's another door where you will not be condemned, but instead you will be celebrated because, by gosh, you're going to fix it. And you'll see this in a lot of different formats. We always form a blue ribbon commission. We form a transformation alliance, and Mayor Jones is going to lead it. We form a compact, and Mayor Smith is going to lead it. And that's great. We all say, yay. That's a good thing we're going to do. But what you really have to do as a board is figure out how to enable your people not to do the sexy thing, not to have the news story, but to work with those kids that are going to fail again and again and again until you have them succeed, until they succeed on their own. So it's a much tougher choice to make than you think it is, and I hope you are prepared to fight a tough battle. The good news is your being here shows that you know that battle is coming and you've got the right idea in mind. I believe we're going to spend a few minutes, each panelist speaking a little bit about our perspective, and I believe we'll start with Dr. Moore for a few minutes to address, as Kelly said, the importance of choice and what boards can do to support choice in Ohio. Dr. Moore.
Probably the hardest thing in the world of education is to reform an existing school district. I keep up with education pretty well, and I know of attempts across the nation to try to reform the school district here and there. And I know about attempts in Colorado when I was out there, other places as well. I know about elections that are taking place soon, which the office and some these sort of things going on in Florida and other places. And I think it would be great. It truly could be a lot for America. If you take over a school district, sustain your place on the school district for a long time, and then actually reform the district, principally through curricular reforms and also by hiring the right kind of teachers and the right kind of people to lead the school. That is a very hard thing because the the educational establishment always fights back. They have all the materials, and frankly, they have all the personnel at this moment. So that's the bad news. I think it could be done. And in one of the sessions where we were talking about how you can actually start phasing in parts of the curriculum that you would actually have in order to improve the schools. There are strategies that could be put in place where you could do that. And at some point, we may want to discuss that. I think there's another thing that you could also do that might be a bit easier, and it might make your case in the long run to set up doing this, but by starting out with, you'll play the in, run, around. And that is by encouraging choice in your district, and a particular kind of choice that is going to thrive in your district, that then you can point to as the model of what education ought to actually look like. So let me tell you why I think this is important. For 7 years, I ran a school in Fort Collins, Colorado, and twice in a row, we were the #1 ranked high school in the state. Taking the state test was easy for the kids. It was boring for them. In fact, Fort Collins, which is one of these cities that these different magazines always rank at the very high, so Money Magazine or one of these magazines says it's the #1 place to live in America. And in the little caption about Fort Collins and how great it is, it said something like, has the highest rated schools in the state. It might have even said schools, singular, I'm not sure. Well, what do you think the district put on their website? Forbes magazine has the highest rated schools in the state. It wasn't their public schools, it was the charter school that I was running. They didn't even so much as give us a thank you letter. And then they capitalized on the fame that we brought to the place. That's just crazy. What should have been happening, if these people would have really cared about the children who were in their schools, is they should have been taking tours through that school in order to understand the principles of a solid education, which, by the way, haven't changed over the last couple of millennia. The very same principles of education that the Founding Fathers wanted for this country. The way to read has not changed in the last 200 years. But the district itself, not only did they not want to hear about our success, but they certainly didn't want to learn from it or capitalize on it. And when we would go to board meetings, which was not often because I didn't like those meetings, and you sat through a bunch of them, so you know why I wouldn't like them. We were treated like a riot. But what if, in your district, you had a school, it was a traditional school, I would say a classical school, but a school of choice, came into the district and thrived, and then every time the naysayers on the board said, oh, that'll never work. Oh, that's another state, or that's a crazy idea. You could say, well, look at this school right here. They're diagramming sentences. Look at how much their kids actually know grammar. You see what I mean? So this would give you leverage and something to point to whereby you can say, see, there's a model of the kind of school we should be learning from this school rather than treating them like second-class citizens and always bragging back about the fact that they are taking money from our district. They're not taking money from the district because the money follows the child. The other thing that this would accomplish is it would create an appetite in your district for that kind of schooling. Because the parents across the country have a desire for this kind of schooling. You see it in the prominence of homeschooling. You see it increasingly in the number of small private schools that are starting up that claim to be classical, and so on. So I don't know whether there's anybody in your district who would want to start a school like that. But I think that you should make it clear, if there are people who talk in those ways, or if you have parents that come to you and who are frustrated and say, I'm just fed up with what goes on in my children's classes, what can we do about it? One of the things that you could do is encourage them, or encourage some group of public-minded people to start a good, solid, traditionally based classical school or charter school and be friendly to it. To set up the thing that I'm just talking about. Well, what would it mean to be friendly to it? Well, for one thing, you wouldn't just denounce it. In Ohio, it's different. You can be chartered through one of these organizations, but there's also a relationship to the district. It's also true in Ohio, and this is one of the things about Ohio that's probably the worst, is that a charter school doesn't get any money until November of the year that it opens up, as far as I understand. So if you're trying to open up a school in which which teachers are going to be teaching in the months of August and September and October, what will you be paying them since the money doesn't come to you in November? It's a crazy law. It's the only state I know that has this law. But the thing that is hardest for schools to find when starting up is a building. And there are a lot of schools around, school districts around the country that have empty buildings. And they know it. And they'll do anything that they can to make sure that a charter school never gets that building. To include leasing it to some children's museum for $1 a year if they have to make sure that a charter school doesn't get the building. So there are things that a district could actually do to encourage choice with the idea of setting this up as a kind of model, which we could then learn from, so that we can improve the district itself. See what I mean? The original ideas of charter schools were actually, it was the head of the AFT, who said we ought to have charter schools, because if we had successful charter schools, that would tell the system itself that's doing wrong. You could look at all these different experiments, and the system would perform. Well, that's, of course, never happened. But you, being in your positions, could try to usher that in, and it would be a strong part of your campaign to improve the district. But understand that the reforms that come forth in the district, particularly curricular, and then also when it comes to teaching the kind of teachers to teach it a really solid curriculum, that's going to be much harder. And so this is the end around that helps set up that long-term plan. So I hope I'm being clear with that, and when we get to the Q&A, we can talk about specifics. That's I hope, something that's a useful strategy to think about. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Mike. My name is Aldis. I'm with the Fordham Institute. I've been around school choice, as Mike mentioned in the introduction, quite a while. Probably a little bit of an atypical background. I started at the Department of Education, so please don't hold that against me. I didn't stay there. For 2.5 years, I ran the state's voucher programs in the state of Florida, where they have some of the largest voucher programs in the nation. So I was very active and involved and able to see exactly how school choice programs were working, how they were serving kids most of the time, how once in a while they had issues that we had to try to work through to make sure that kids received the services they needed to. After that, I came to Ohio, where I ran School Choice Ohio, the largest voucher advocacy group in the state, for almost 4 years. Then I also had an opportunity to serve the last year and a half or so at the Walton Family Foundation, which is one of the largest funders of school choice programs of all kinds, charter schools, vouchers. I was a program officer in charge of their investments in the Midwest region. So with that background, I've seen the power of school choice. I'm extremely excited to be here in front of you today, because normally when I talk to school board members about school choice, I see them wanting to hurt me. And since you're here momentarily, it's a nice difference. So with my background, what I want to leave you with is 6, 7, 8 very quick ideas that you could do, depending on the politics of your individual board, to try to make your board more friendly to school choice, to try to make it so that kids in your district can have more options. So I'm going to try to be very specific, and I'd be happy to follow up questions or emails and such later if this format doesn't allow us to get to all of them. First off, one of the school choice options, and Dr. Moore mentioned this, that's very important, is homeschooling. That many families in your district are going to find this is the right thing for them. But the school board helps direct the superintendent, who enforces the state's laws related to homeschooling. So make sure your superintendent is following the state law, of course, but is doing so in a way that doesn't try to stymie parents, but is trying to help them, trying to work with them, trying to make homeschooling work. So just that, setting that tone to make sure the superintendent understands his or her instructions are to help make homeschooling work and not to be just a thorn in the side of parents trying to exercise that option. Another thing, and this works more for large districts than for smaller districts, is intra-district open enrollment. So let's say you have 3 or 4 elementary schools. You typically probably have a map that has bus maps, and it says, okay, if you live on 3rd Street, you're going to Jefferson Elementary School. How necessary is that? Perhaps intra-district open enrollment would be a policy you could implement that would allow students to say, okay, if Jefferson's the right elementary for you and you live near it, go ahead, that's your first option, you can have that. But if there's space available down the street at Lincoln Elementary, as long as there's space, let parents and families choose within your own district where to go. That might actually prevent them from transferring to the local private school. That might prevent them from moving away to another community if it's not the right fit for them. It also will be very powerful information for you as a board member. If everybody's trying to leave Jefferson Elementary, it might tell you something about the leadership of the school or about the quality of the teachers in the classrooms. So that's something you can do that's fairly painless. Another option is inter-district open enrollment. Ohio has 614 school districts. Well over 400 of them offer some form of open enrollment. If your district isn't one of those, I'd seriously encourage you to consider it. Right now, for a district to participate in open enrollment, the local school board has to pass a resolution, essentially setting that policy and laying out the parameters of the policy. Over 400 districts have done it, so if yours hasn't done it, what it would allow you to do, though, is to accept students, potentially from anywhere in the state, who wanted to come to your school. So that's again, something you can do to set out there to make sure that you do that. Now, how does that affect your own internal students? Well, first off, it's only on a space available basis. The state of law allows you to say, look, I have 5 third-grade seats that are sitting empty, and if you want to come, so you can set out the actual capacity by grade, so you still control your school. But secondly, if districts around you don't offer open enrollment, and there might be some kids in your district who are better served going next door, you'll be putting a competitive pressure on those districts around you to offer open enrollment if you choose to exercise that and welcome students from surrounding areas. Another thing is magnets or innovative schools. You have the ability to craft themed schools, whether you want a classical education or you want a Montessori type elementary school. Again, depending on your district size, some of these may be practical, some may not be. But I would encourage you as a school board to think about what does your community need? Is it a dual language program? Is it, whatever. There's probably 10 or 15 different types of schools that are pretty common nowadays. But as a school board, you have the power and the ability to do. But let's say that's too much work. You decide, you know what, we can't really do that. You can open your doors to charter schools, which I think Dr. Moore did a great job of presenting the case for that. But you can not only invite them in, you actually can authorize the charter schools yourself in the state of Ohio. As a school district, you have the ability to open a charter, to allow a charter school to open, and to provide the oversight for that school as a sponsor. That would allow you to if the current system wasn't changing quickly enough, wasn't being responsive to the needs of the kids in your community, that would give you an opportunity to open the door and maybe bring in or even recruit high-performing schools from other parts of the state or other parts of the country. And those are some of the ones that are, and I've tried to do these on the scale of easy to down to hard. The last 2 options I'll give you are really, really hard. But it might be right in your individual school district. One, you could potentially work toward creating a charter school district. There's a couple districts in the state of Michigan that have all the schools within the district are charters. Now what this would allow is you have a great deal of innovation. The role of the traditional district would change immensely. I would encourage you to read up and look at, there's Muskegon Heights and Highland Park in Michigan have both become charter districts. It's not the right option for everyone, but it's something more akin to what's happened in New Orleans with the recovery school district that was created. After Hurricane Katrina, there was so much upheaval in New Orleans that they ended up creating, to try to get the school system back on a solid foundation, they ended up creating essentially a whole network of independently operated charter schools, along with some district schools. But it's very much a choice district. Over 80% of the students in New Orleans currently attend a charter school. And then the last thing, and this is the most difficult, that one wasn't hard enough, if you're going to blow up your school district and create a charter district. The last one is potentially think about how, if you want to give students in your district the opportunity for private school choice, what could your district do to encourage, allow vouchers. Now, this isn't going to be the right option for many districts. But if you think it is for yours, there's actually a district in Colorado, Douglas County, just south of Denver, that's one of the highest performing school districts in the state that has actually allowed charter schools, has actually allowed students to receive a voucher to attend a private school. Now, immediately after the program was passed and implemented, it was threatened in court and actually sued. And so there's been an injunction. So students haven't actually been able to use it yet. They lost at the initial district court, but at the Court of Appeals, they actually won. And the district's actions were found to be constitutional. And those were state constitutional claims, so they wouldn't apply in Ohio. But there are some avenues if you wanted to pursue it, and lots of groups who would probably likely be very interested in helping the school district if they wanted to say, you know, we're going to provide the best public schools we can. But if for some reason we can't provide the services you need, we don't want to keep you here because we own you in some way, because you live in our district. We want to give you the option to attend a school that best meets your needs. And that might be a local Catholic school down the street. It might be an independent school, independent private school that is a college prep type atmosphere. Who knows what the option is? There's hundreds of different private schools all over the state of Ohio. But that might be an option if you want to go down that route and learn more about it. It's incredibly difficult, but it is actually one that is truly groundbreaking and changing. One of the options that is often already used by school districts, and you may know this, especially if you've had to face this challenge, school districts already, if you have a student with special needs, who you're not able to provide a free appropriate public education for because of the resources, or you're not the appropriate setting, it's not the appropriate environment, your school district can't provide it, you can contract with a private school or a private provider to provide those educational services. Pushing it a little bit further to suggest whether you could do that in an environment of a traditional education student to provide them a Catholic education or whatever. It would be groundbreaking. It certainly would generate a lot of attention. So if you want attention, if you don't want attention, you may want to shy away from it. But these are a number of the options from easiest to hardest that districts can choose to be more friendly to school choice.
If you ask the question, what does state government do and what's important, there are a couple of different ways to answer that question. When I reported at the State House, what I would look to first is the budget and what counts. What you typically hear about in the budget is Medicaid, major expense of approximately $30 billion annual state budget. I don't know precisely, but I would say estimate 12 to 15 billion is Medicaid, and that sounds quite large. The second item is of similar magnitude. I'm going to estimate about 10 billion, that's education. However, in Ohio, education is about half funded on average by the state and about half funded by local property tax and the state local income tax. So the real figure on Ohio education is about $20 billion, making it clearly the winner in priorities, the top priority, the most important thing we do as taxpayers and as a state, at least as measured by our dollars. And many of us, if not most of us, would agree that education is about the most important thing we can do for our children, whether it's the basics of what this country is founded on, or the other needs of those children to make sure that they are productive members of society. Representative Andy Brenner is sitting in the catbird seat on that important policy issue. The House of Representatives. He's the vice chair of the Education Committee, and that is where the important work is being done. And he has a long history, and he's married. There's somebody quite close to him in the room who also has a long history of working very hard on these education issues and other issues that are important to a lot of our founding values. I'd like to introduce Representative Andy Brenner.
This afternoon to discuss school choice issues. What I'm going to do is kind of discuss what has gone on in the General Assembly over the last couple of years and what maybe you could do to help, and some of the things that have occurred. First of all, I come from a suburban school district with theoretically some of the best schools in the state of Ohio and in the nation. In fact, a lot of people ask me, well, why are you for school choice? Because you're coming from an area that has good schools. And I say, well, because we need to improve all the schools in the state of Ohio. And the only way to do it in many of these areas, especially the urban 8 school districts, is to have alternative schools available for kids to go to, allow some competition. And we've done a lot of things over the last 3 years. In fact, Ohio this past, I think this will be the 21st year of school choice. Then at the time, Speaker Batchelder was in the state assembly and helped pass, and it actually survived the Cleveland school choice plan and survived the courts. And so we've had school choice in Ohio now for about 20 years. When Governor Kasich took office a few years ago, one of his big things was to put some people in his administration that would promote school choice and to expand school choice. And we have had many bills in the Ohio House to do that, to try to empower parents to be able to allow their students to go to other schools and alternative schools. And give you an example of what we're up against is probably what you're up against in your local school boards. Last General Assembly, in the 129th, we had a bill called House Bill 136. Representative Matt Huffman, who's the Speaker Pro Tem, it was his bill. I, along with about 40 or so of my colleagues, were a co-sponsor on the bill. And what it did was it expanded school choice throughout the entire state, regardless of income. And basically, any kid could take a voucher, $5,000, and be able to choose to go to a school of their choice. Of course, the teachers' unions at the time, who were upset about Senate Bill 5, came completely out of the woodwork, came completely unglued, and attacked that bill and everybody who was a co-sponsor on it, left and right. We modified it. I think the bill had 9 hearings ultimately in the Education Committee. In fact, that was the one that took up the bulk of the Education Committee's time in the prior General Assembly, only to die in the General Assembly and the committee. Never even made it out of the committee. To be able to do it. We might have made it out of the committee, but we never were able to pass it. Going forward, we've had some additional bills. Most recently, in the budget bill this year, House Bill 59, the governor put in there, along with Representative Huffman, who was trying to push this, and I supported the issue. I supported the budget bill. Added basically vouchers for kindergarten and first grade, so that younger students can choose to go to alternative schools. We had a lot of pushback within our own party on that one. And when we were able to get it through, it was signed into law, and that's a big thing, because that's everywhere in the state of Ohio. Eventually it's going to expand to other grades down the road. Along with one of my colleagues, Bill Patton, and this gets back to my original point, why would a suburban school rep promote school choice? Well, Representative Bill Patton and I were joint sponsors on a bill to allow tax credit scholarship. In fact, Chad Aldis here, easy enough for me to say, helped me with this bill. And what it basically allowed is that in the state of Florida, there is a scholarship organization. If you as individuals were to donate money to a scholarship organization up to several $1,000s, you can write it off on your tax return dollar for dollar through a tax credit. And businesses can write off dollar for dollar up to $300,000 per year. And what this did was it set a cap of $20 million. So once the tax credits are used up, there's no additional dollars. But this allows a private sector alternative for kids to be able to choose alternative schools. We actually introduced this bill in the prior General Assembly. It was in the Ways and Means Committee. I think it had 4 or 5 hearings and died in the Ways and Means Committee. We have since opened it and reintroduced the same bill, House Bill 158, in this General Assembly. Now this bill in Florida started off at $20 million. It's now gone to $250 million. And it has actually been able to reduce the cost of educating students, because if you have students who are paying $5,000 or $6,000 versus $10,000 or $15,000, and they're able to get an education that's comparable or better, obviously the savings are significant and huge, and it improves those students' academic performance, which is what we're trying to accomplish with this. It also puts pressure on the local schools to make some changes. And you know, we're hoping to have a hearing on the bill or two in this General Assembly on that to continue that. But what that led to, and what you've probably heard, is last year in the General Assembly we passed something called the Cleveland Plan. And this came about soon after we had the defeat of House Bill, or Senate Bill 5, and this was the one that was going to be collective bargaining reform. Mayor White, a Democrat from Cleveland, approached our General Assembly and said, we need to improve Cleveland schools, we need to include things that will help with school choice, and we need to do collective bargaining reform. And we ended up passing the Cleveland Plan so that more kids in Cleveland can have more choice in schools, because he realized there wasn't going to be anything left of the Cleveland public schools if he didn't do something. We had it this year, because of the success of that, Mayor Coleman saw the same thing, and their schools are in very bad shape. And so he approached us, we did the same thing. Now, his plan called for massive tax increase, which I think anybody would have known, based on all the scandals that they've had, would have sent it down to defeat, which it did. And I think that there's still going to be a lot to go there with the school choice. But many of you, like myself, live in suburban school districts. And you're probably approached, well, especially from your school teachers and teachers unions, you know, do not support school choice because it takes away from our schools, our public schools. And to give you an example, I mean, I recently received an email within the last couple of days from one of our schools in my district where I represent up in Delaware County. And they were pointing out that $72 million was siphoned off for a virtual academy school. Well, I went ahead and did the math and divided the number of students in the school and took a look at what the cost was for the school and where these schools were located and the kids they were targeting. And the average cost per student in these schools was about $6,100, which in my area is about $3,000 or more less. It's $3,000 less per student than what we're spending. So while the superintendent was trying to send that to me to tell me, no, look, we're spending all this money on these schools and they have bad performance, it's like, well, yeah, but they're in areas where the schools are disasters. Our urban school districts have been a complete disaster for 20 and 30 years. And anything we can do to drive down those costs and improve performance is definitely something that you should support. And to give you an example, Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, Columbus, your average cost per school up there is around $17,000 to $20,000 per student. Most of these alternative schools, the average cost is between $6,000 and $8,000 per student. Just think of all the savings we could have if all these kids were put into these private schools. Yet the performance, and this is where your local superintendents and your local teachers unions will say, you know, hey, well, this is still siphoning off money. Their schools are bad. Look at the new report cards. They're coming in with F's and D's. Well, not exactly. If you take a look at their overall average value of the schools, they're actually performing at or better than the urban schools where they're located. So meaning, if you're comparing apples to apples, their cost is about a third to half of the urban districts, yet their performance is as good or better. I mean, that to me would be an indication that we want all of those schools to switch over to it, because our schools and the urban and the suburban schools and the rural schools would be far better off because you'd have more dollars available for those schools. So, you know, when they're making that argument, they need to make sure they're comparing apples to apples. We've got things like dropout recovery schools. So when students drop out of your schools, it doesn't matter where they are in the state of Ohio, and they enroll in a dropout recovery school, you know, many of those dropout recovery schools, their performance looks bad on the performance indicators. Well, that's true because these kids may be 2 or 3 years behind already, and not only that, they're in and out because they're probably coming from broken homes. But the key here is once they leave the public school, they're no longer held against the public school. So, you know, when you're looking at that as well, and you've got your superintendents and the teachers unions telling you that, you say, well, wait a minute, you know, now that kid is not being held against us, so our performance rating is artificially higher because the kid is now in a dropout recovery school. We have other things. John Peterson is the former state representative from my area. He has a daughter who had autism, and he still does, obviously. he created the special needs scholarships so that we had a huge fight over this. We were fighting the teachers' unions even to be able to put this on the websites so that people were aware that they had this as an alternative. So if you have parents with kids with special needs that need additional help and can go to an alternative school, there are scholarships out there for them. And in that way, if they can go to these other schools that will help them, it will be definitely helping out your local schools as well, because then you won't need to hire as many special needs teachers for that. Educational choice to me is something that has definitely been needed. It's something that Milton Friedman promoted back in the 1970s. As far as I know, there's only one country on the planet that's actually adopted Milton Friedman's plan, and that was Sweden. Basically, anybody can go to any school of their choice, and anybody can open it up. They've got high standards, and you can go to all these alternative schools. I think we need to continue to promote that here. Things that have happened, like with Bobby Jindal down in Louisiana, we're taking a look at that, saying, we need to adopt more of those kinds of choices here in Ohio. The governor's A through F grading system is going to help make you be able to point out to your administrations that, hey, look, we have areas here that are coming in at C, D, and F. Especially if most of you look, your special needs and your gifted are probably coming in Fs, even in the best schools in the state of Ohio. I think the parents are now, they're going to have the knowledge of knowing this. They're going to say, hey, I don't know if I want my kid with gifted talent, who's gifted and talented, wanting to stay in this school, or force, administration to change and adjust their policies. If not, they can take their kid and go to an alternative school. So I think overall school choice is good. I think we need to continue to promote it. And there are going to be a lot of things coming up in the near future, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions here in a little bit. So thank you.
However, is there anyone who has any questions that you would like to pose to the panel?
I would like to know what Andrew Brenner's stance is on Common Core. Apparently you're on the committee, the educational committee.
Yes.
Could you please state what your stance is on Common Core and how you feel that you will help to remove it from Ohio?
Well, I'd be more happy to answer that, but we're discussing school choice.
I would like to, perhaps that question could be addressed afterward, if we could address.
I would like to hear what he has to say to the whole group, because this is very important to us in Ohio. And in Common Core meeting, we were told we could ask some questions in this one.
That's absolutely fine. If we could just take a moment or two and for the moment address the theme, and then at the end we'll return to that in just a minute.
Thank you.
The young lady.
Honestly, the point of school choice is to go to a school that can provide a better education for whatever strengths your child might have. But if we stick with Common Core, which is pretty much a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter education, then how does school choice make that much of a difference?
I saw Dr. Moore, I believe, address Common Core at lunch, and I know there's a good, strong interest in that. It sounds like we'll be addressing Common Core. But let me ask, are there any other questions more directly on the theme of choice, and then we'll finish up with a discussion of Common Core.
For our school district, we've got administration is very forward-thinking in regards to these things. It's obviously a public school, but we are 200 plus in open enrollment right now. And this is a rural school because we have school districts failing around us, so they're all coming to us. We also have, we're very active in the Peterson Scholarship. Our superintendent writes that we keep these monies in our school district. And now this is the thing that's coming up that I need to learn about in regard to school choice is the possibility of sponsoring, and I need definition, sponsoring an alternative school that we put our name on. And it's not necessarily a school that, it would be wonderful to have a school like, the traditional, but we're looking at alternative for our kids that are ending up going into ISS or an alternative school across the county because they cannot maintain in a normal school district or a school setting.
Unless one of the...
And it's a private school.
I'm sorry, you're addressing a specific private school?
Well, I'm trying to understand what a sponsorship by a public school district might entail in a school like this. And maybe I'm not even addressing the right
It
question.
means you're gonna have to take on your unions. I mean, that's the bottom line, because they don't want charter schools, they don't want community schools.
But it's something we're looking at right now, so that's why.
I think that be prepared to take on a fight against your unions.
There certainly is call that a political difficulty. You have to persuade the public, your stakeholders. Certainly the unions, they play a very large role. Legally, the options you have are, you have more flexibility. You are in a good position as public district board members because you are entitled to sponsor an independent school, and you act as a governing authority. You act as the oversight body. And that stands in distinction to somebody who's operating the school. As a sponsor, you would be drawing the standards as narrowly as you need to, and then judging whether your contracted party is fulfilling those goals. And that provides you with, it gets to a central idea of board governance. There, I will tell you, after in the various roles I've played, there's a lot of busy work at board meetings that means nothing. And narrowing your duties to looking at performance and looking at the funds gives you the freedom to make judgments about what counts. So it is potentially a very good option, a complex option, but a very good option for you. And many of us will be happy to speak with you further about that.
Can I just say one
Yes.
thing about that? If you are thinking about setting up a magnet school or allowing a charter school or something like that to exist in your district.
Louder.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. If you are thinking about, if you are thinking about setting up a magnet school or allowing a charter school or some sort of non-district school to operate in your district, the most important thing is to make sure that that school is going to be governed by a semi-independent board, that it just won't become a lackey of your district, in other words. And there are a few models for that. For example, even before the charter law was passed in Colorado, there was a group of parents that wanted something like a charter school before it was available. And so they got set up with a permanent steering committee, is what they called it. It's a school called the Evelyn, which has a very high success rate in Colorado for a long time. And so you just need to make sure that governance is set up so that it's not just going to be the regular progressive public school crowd take it over as soon as they get the chance, or that they have it from the beginning. You see what I mean? For it to be any good, for it to mean anything, it does have to be able to operate semi-autonomously.
And did I see any other hands? We are going to have just a few minutes, and I did promise to get back to the Common Core topic. The gentleman in the second from the back row there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't deny that there's problems with the public school, and we should be working to address those. But sometimes people that express a particular viewpoint have particular interests. And I was just curious as to whether there are any financial interests on the part of the panel connected with charter schools or something else. And, you know, if you have children, I'd be curious to know where your children go to school. That's a panel, for the panel.
Hi, so my name is Chad Aldis. I have 3 kids. Each of them one is in college now. He's a freshman at Ohio University, a public school. Go Bobcats. He graduated from Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools, attended public school in Florida and then in Ohio after we moved here. My daughters are both students at Gahanna Jefferson Public School. One's in the middle school, Gahanna Middle School East. One is at Jefferson, so I wasn't that creative with my elementary school name in the example I gave. One of them did attend kindergarten at Connections Academy, a virtual online school, because the district was refusing to work with us on the age determination date. She had a September birthday, and I'm like, this is crazy. She's ready for school. So she went to school and went to first grade in our local district after that. In terms of financial interests, the Thomas B. Fordham Institute has for about probably 10 years now been an authorizer or sponsor of charter schools. We currently sponsor about 10 or 12 schools. You know, It is not, despite what you may read, a money-making enterprise. If you sponsor correctly, sponsors do not get rich. You know, it's a negative outflow of cash. Now, as a foundation, we actually have an endowment that created the foundation. We also seek national funding from groups like the Walton Foundation and others who support school choice. So in terms of a financial interest, it's certainly not a positive on the balance sheet, but we have been active in it.
Thank you. Any other panel members?
I am probably next closest to that. I work for a sponsor, so we are paid by a 3% fee. And I appreciate the comment, that's absolutely right, but it works from all directions. My wife has worked for 25 years for the Thomas Worthington School District as she's an artist and an art teacher. So if you'd like to challenge my bona fides, perhaps I'm biased in favor of public district schools, I don't know. For quite a while they provided very generous insurance to me, I will say that. We are substantially out of time. I did make a promise to you that we would address Common Core. I believe both Dr. Moore and Representative Brenner are going to mention that. I would caution both of you that we really should try to address it in the space of 3 or 4 minutes to respect the schedule.
Yeah, on that previous question, my employer is Hillsdale College. My kids are educated by their mother. And I try to go to public schools all the time and ask me if I can go in and visit. And I think it would actually be easier to go into a school in North Korea than to go into a regular public school. So I'd be happy to go to public schools and actually tell them how they can improve what they're doing. But they won't even let me in as a prospective parent. So I think it's unlikely they would listen to my advice. As far as Common Core and choice, which was one of the questions that we had, I think that is an extremely important question. Because at the very moment when school choice matters in a lot of states, I live in Indiana, it's a good state for school choice. I've worked at a school in Colorado, a good school state for school choice. Ohio has a lot of good things going on in terms of choice. At the very moment when choice is now possible, the Common Core is coming down, which is a structured curriculum that people have to follow. And it does dictate ways that you have to teach. And if you look at the way that the standardized testing is set up, and this goes back to some of the things that I did during lunch, when they say that you have to teach a range of authors, and you have to get through this range of authors every 2 years, that in itself is an imposition on the curriculum. But the reality is you have to teach this range of authors every year because students are going to be tested every year. So that means if you had a classical charter school, there are others examples that I could give you, but if you had a classical charter school in which you wanted them to read only authors by only the great Greek authors in the first semester of their freshman year, and only the Roman authors in the second semester of their freshman year, in other words, to go through the classics, they will have not read Sandra Cisneros. They will have not read all the different authors that they're requiring students to read in books to give you. And the more time that you spend on reading complete authors, which I suggested is the best way actually to understand literature, the less you prepare your students for the kinds of tests that they're requiring. So it's actually a way to consolidate schools in a curricular way so that the kinds of choice that are actually working right now, the kinds of curricula that are actually working right now, will be stifled. And of course, most public educators, to include public educators unfortunately in charter schools, they're absolutely slavish when it comes to the standardized test. They panic, and they will not teach anything beyond the test. So this is the easiest way in the world to make sure that you don't actually have good curriculum in your schools.
To answer the one prior question, my wife and I don't have kids yet, but my nieces are in public schools, and we live in a district where we pay about $8,100 a year in property tax, most of which goes to the local public school who claims that they're the best. Show of hands here real quickly. How many of you are school board members? Back to you is, why haven't you gotten rid of Common Core? Ohio Revised Code Section 3301.079B3. I'm going to read this to you. Be prepared to look at it, and I see you shaking your head no. but you have the authority to remove it. Gives the power to the school boards. All school districts, community schools, and STEM schools may utilize the state standards in the model curriculum. May, that's a key word there. Utilize the state standards and model curriculum established by the state board. And then at the end of it, it says, nothing in this section requires any school district to utilize all or any part of model curriculum developed under this section. 3301.079 gives you the authority right now, without any bills being passed, to dump Common Core. Now, we can talk some more afterwards.
You have had 3 informed gentlemen and a newspaper reporter have the pleasure of serving you today, so thank you very much.